Where's he at?
Why that
He
be?
said we're Philistines if we stand over here. We're Palestinians. I'm not sure what he said.
And you two can stand in the middle and tell us the story.
Yeah?
And in the meantime, if you see pebbles, then that's the ammunition. There are more actually on the other side than here.
It's kind of longish, so I'll...
Go on, go for it.
Now the Philistines
Good
gathered
story.
their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Socho, which belongs to Judah. And they encamped between Socho and Ezekah in Hephes Damin. Damim. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to encounter the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, while Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. When a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He also had bronze greaves on his legs, and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. His shield carrier also walked before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them,
Why do you come out and draw up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall become our servants and serve us. Again the Philistine said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together.
When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons. And Jesse was old in the days of Saul, advanced in many years. The 3 older sons of Jesse had gone after Saul to the battle, and the names of his 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and the second to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. Now the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's flock at Bethlehem. The Philistine came forward morning and evening for 40 days and took his stand. Then Jesse said to David his son, Take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brothers. Also bring 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000, and look into the welfare of your brothers, and bring back news of all of them. For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. So David arose early in the morning and left the flock with a keeper, and took the supplies and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up in the battle array, army against army. Then David kept his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath named Goliath, was coming up from the army of the Philistines, and he spoke these same words, and David heard them. When all the men of Israel saw the man, they fled from him and were greatly afraid. The men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who's coming up? Surely he's coming up to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. Will give the king's daughter. The king will give his daughter to him. Then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should be taunting the armies of the living God? The people answered him in accord with this word, saying, Thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David, and he said, What have you come down here for? And with whom have you left those sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you've come down in order to see the battle. But David said, What have I done now? Was it not just a question? Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same thing as before. When the words which David spoke were heard, they then told those words to Saul, and he sent for David. David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail on account of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Then Saul said to David, You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth, while he's been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, Your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lamb or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. And I went out after him, and I attacked him. I rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his garments. Yeah, you go. Then Saul clothed David with his garments and put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with his armor. David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested the armor. So David said to Saul, I can't go with these. I haven't tested them. And David took them off. He took his stick in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in the shepherd's bag which he had, even in his pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Then the Philistine came on and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy with a little handsome appearance. The Philistine said to David,
Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?
and the Philistine cursed David by his God. The Philistine also said to David,
Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.
Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give it into our hands. Then it happened when the Philistine rose up and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. That's awesome. And David put his hand into his bag and took it from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, so that he fell on his face to the ground. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. End of story.
So what the Philistines been on this side?
No, the Philistines are over here.
Rest away here.
And here's a weapon.
It's the light of it.
Find yourself a weapon. You don't want to. Here's one or two. A round pebble.